So I have to wonder why China would decide to fly a balloon over the US with a myriad of spy equipment trying to detect who knows what. We assume spy on the nuclear capabilities of the United States, full well knowing that the US would eventually detect this balloon and not only shoot it down eventually, but try to interdict it, exploit it, etc., which is exactly what the US did. In fact, we shot it down off the coast of the Carolinas and recovered almost everything. And now we are going to have a bonanza in counterintelligence gathering from China. But it was just a month ago that we were discussing China's pivot away from the wolf warrior foreign policy, especially with the US, because they were facing a lot of problems on the global stage. They were facing a decline in their economy. They were facing the pivot away from China by both Europe and the United States, with the US looking to Mexico. And I've been saying this since I've been making TikToks, that the US is pivoting away from China to South America for its manufacturing. And it wasn't necessarily because of China's human rights violations. That's partly the reason, but it's just cheaper now to manufacture in places like Mexico and South America logistically. Logistics have become the cost prohibitive arm of manufacturing for a lot of companies. Plus, the US government is exacerbating that with the sanctions that they're placing on chip manufacturing and whatnot. Anyways, because of this, you have to start thinking, why would China do this? They've been trying to court the US. In fact, Anthony Blinken was going to China right around the time this balloon happened to float over northern Idaho, Montana, etc. And the funny thing is I don't think China's stupid at all, but this was a very stupid act, because the minute this balloon was detected, we didn't have to do anything other than button up all the nuclear hatches and not speak. And as the balloon flew over the nuclear sites, communication stopped. All government activity stopped. So they basically got a still picture of nuclear sites. There was no activity. So they got nothing. Meanwhile, the US used its U-2 spy plane to fly over the top of this thing and detect what it was pushing back to the satellites that it was communicating with. Not only that, we recovered everything. And it has me thinking that, like Putin, I think Xi Jinping is distributed away from any kind of smart decision makers in the administration. He's surrounded himself, like Putin, with a series of yes men, or at the very least, a series of, I'm not going to get in his way or even say yes, but because Xi is become so, I don't know, megalomaniacal, that's where he's at, similar to Putin. And that's concerning, because then he can make rash decisions on things like Taiwan, which is why we need to show China that it is futile to try and attack Taiwan. And this has become a situation where China is in they're not going to come out of this looking good. They're trying to pass blame to the US, saying we shot down by force with our military a civilian balloon. Yeah, bullshit. We all know it wasn't a civilian balloon. The thing was enormous. It was carrying like a busload worth of equipment, and it was like a 300-foot balloon. It wasn't a weather balloon. Cut the shit. And then the other thing is they're now trying to play this counter information game. We're saying, oh, the US has flown something like 657, which is a weird number to come up with, balloons over to China and spied on them. Well, no, we haven't. That's nonsense. I mean, the US has a spy balloon program, but it's in its infancy after we shuttered it long ago, because lo and behold, our satellites are so good, we watch you in real time. And we do it all the time. I'm not saying we're not spying on China. We absolutely are. We're not doing it with balloons. It's nonsense to say that we are. And it just goes to show you that it's almost like the Chinese tech may be that far behind, and the decision-making apparatus, which is led by Xi Jinping in China, is so archaic that they thought floating a balloon over the US was some sort of a good idea. And there was no one to tell them no, because as we saw in the most recent Chinese Communist Party Congress, he very publicly removed anyone who could potentially detract from his ideas of what China is supposed to be and where they're going. And that is both dangerous for our allies in the South China Sea. By our, I mean the U.S. allies in the South China Sea, but also good for us because it really means that, like Putin, they're going to set up a series of really dumb decisions that are going to lead to their inevitable fall. And that has been something I've been saying for, again, since I've been on TikTok for almost a year now, or a little over a year actually. And the funny thing is, well, it's not really funny, but they are like using each other's playbooks, Putin and Xi Jinping. And Xi Jinping is trying to use Putin's misinformation campaigns for conducting counter information tactics against the U.S. They're saying that the U.S. they're deflecting by saying the U.S. blew up the pipeline, which doesn't have anything to do with China at this point. They're just trying to deflect from the fact that they stupidly flew a balloon over, and now they're going to lose their ass in intelligence, and they're going to look like fools on the global stage as the U.S. continues to brief countries on what they've gathered from these balloons. Meanwhile, just like Xi Jinping, Putin decided he was going to execute a 1980s armor invasion into Ukraine. And this is something that hasn't been viable in the combined arms era because the U.S. recognized that simply rolling a tanks into a country like a blitzkrieg isn't viable when that ground infantry has the capability to destroy armor with things like javelins and other types of anti-tank weaponry. And therefore, he is failing. Just like Xi Jinping is failing in his intelligence game. And I'm starting to wonder if they aren't suffering from the same types of problems, in that they're so enclosed, so entrenched, that no one can tell them no. No one even wants to bring them bad news. So it's not even that they're making informed decisions. They're just making decisions based on lies. Everyone's telling them everything's going good, and it's not. And Putin's a little more shut in than Xi Jinping, but they both are very much, I guess, weary and or leery rather, and standoffish from any kind of media that reports the not rosy picture. And so what we're seeing is two sides to the same authoritarian coin, where they've eliminated any kind of dissent within their organizations, but it was smart dissent that they needed to make informed decisions. And now we're seeing things like Xi Jinping floating balloons, and when it goes badly for China, they decide they have no unified message. It's just kind of a conglomerate. The reason the U.S. didn't answer the U.S. calls to China didn't go answered is because there was no message coming from the top. Probably because people were afraid to tell Xi Jinping the true story of what was going on with this balloon. He may not have even known that this was going on within his government. He has to focus so domestically inward because of all of the uprisings and problems with zero COVID and demographics and all of that, the economy. He's focusing on that so heavily that he may have sanctioned a balloon program years ago, and now it's just bit him in the ass. And that's where we're at. And now Russia is the same thing. Putin sanctioned what he knew, a 1980s armored blitzkrieg. The problem is he had no defenses to cover him. He didn't have logistics lines. He thought that they could be like the Nazis which is ironic, in World War II, blast in and say we're here, people were going to welcome him with flowers, and it didn't happen. And we're seeing two authoritarian dictators get a taste of reality, but they're not really tasting it. They're being fed the excuses, or not even being fed at all the true reality. And when that happens, we have no idea where that goes from here.